The college corridors buzzed with laughter, life, and loud energy. It was the kind of place where dreams floated in the air, where friendships bloomed with every passing day, and where each group had their own little world. But among all that color, there was one face that carried no such brightness. Her name was Asa, a girl who didn't speak much, didn't laugh like others, and always kept her eyes low and her presence smaller than she deserved. While the world called her strange, no one ever tried to see why she was the way she was. She was often called the quiet backbencher, or the boring one. Some said she thought too highly of herself, while others believed she was just emotionally closed off. But no one knew that the silence she carried wasn't arrogance, it was survival. Asa came from a lower middle-class background. Her father was chronically ill, and her mother earned through sewing clothes for others. Asa studied through scholarships and part-time tuitions. Every step of her life was a careful balance, between responsibilities and dreams, between poverty and pride. Every day she would walk through college like a ghost, unnoticed, untouched, unheard. But that didn't mean she wasn't watching or feeling. She felt everything, every whisper behind her back, every laugh that mocked her clothes, her silence, her struggle. She just chose not to respond. But in choosing to remain silent, she unknowingly gave others the license to assume she was weak. In her class, the most popular girls were Hadia, Sahar, and Iman. They were loud, stylish, full of confidence, and often full of cruel sarcasm. They didn't like Asa's presence. She kills the vibe, they'd say. Look at her clothes, does she even care? She never laughs. Like seriously, is she even alive? These words were thrown like stones, but Asa never flinched. She absorbed everything, quietly, like a sponge. One day, the professor announced a group assignment. Each group had to prepare a presentation on social issues, and Asa was randomly placed in the same group as Hadia, Sahar, and Iman. The tension was visible. The girls rolled their eyes, clearly unhappy. Great, now we have to carry the silent baggage too, Iman whispered, loud enough for Asa to hear. Asa didn't say a word. She quietly opened her notebook and started working. Over the next few days, the girls barely involved her. They made WhatsApp groups without her, planned scripts, and discussed themes on their own. But Asa didn't argue. She simply researched, stayed up late nights, collected real statistics, designed slides, and sent everything to them. She didn't demand credit. She just did her part, in silence. The day of the presentation arrived. The group walked up on stage and presented confidently. But not once did they mention Asa's name. When the professor praised their data, Hadia smiled and said, "Yes sir, we worked really hard on it." Asa sat in the front row, alone, looking straight ahead. No tears. No expression. Just silence. A silence that had now begun to ache inside her. Later that evening, she went to the washroom and stood in front of the mirror. For a long time, she stared at herself. The girl staring back wasn't weak, she was tired. Tired of being unheard. Tired of being invisible. That night, something inside her shifted. The storm she had been holding for years, it had started to rise. A week later, the college announced its annual youth conference. A stage where students would speak on real-life challenges, mental health, social injustice, class differences. It was voluntary, and the audience would include professors, students, and media guests. Without telling anyone, Asa filled out the form. When the list of participants was posted, the whole college burst into gossip. Asa, she's going to speak. Bro, this is gonna be hilarious. Imagine if she faints on stage. The day arrived. The hall was packed. Lights, cameras, recording crew, and hundreds of students. Hadia and her friends sat right in front, smirking. The host began calling the names of speakers. Asa was the third. When her name echoed through the speakers, the audience chuckled. But then, silence. Asa walked up to the stage, in her plain clothes, no makeup, no drama. She looked at the mic, held it gently, took a deep breath, and then said, "My name is Asa. You don't know me. Because I've never spoken. Because when you laughed, I listened. When you mocked, I stayed quiet. And you thought I was weak. But let me tell you something, silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes, it is the scream we can't afford to release." The hall went dead silent. I stayed quiet not because I was scared, but because I knew, if I ever started speaking, you'd have to look at your own cruelty. I am not just one girl, I am every girl who sat alone in lunch breaks, every student whose efforts were stolen, every child whose tears were invisible. She spoke about emotional bullying, poverty, mental pressure, and silent abuse. Her voice was calm but fierce. Her words didn't shout, they pierced. By the time she ended, the entire hall was in stunned silence. Some cried, some looked down in shame. The same girls who once laughed, now couldn't meet her eyes. Asa stepped down from the stage. Her walk was slow, but her head was high. That day, she didn't just speak. She awakened something in everyone. For once, silence had won over noise. That day, Asa proved to the world. After the youth conference, Asa was no longer the invisible girl walking quietly down the corridors. People looked at her differently now, some with awe, some with guilt, and some with genuine respect. Professors called her words transformative, students whispered her name in the hallways, and even social media began buzzing with her speech. A video clip of her talk had gone viral. People were messaging her from all corners of the country, thanking her for voicing the pain they had buried for years. But fame wasn't what she wanted. Recognition wasn't her goal. She had spoken because her silence had reached its edge. But now she had found something bigger than herself. She had found purpose. Soon, the principal called her into the office. "Asa, we're proud of you," she said with a warm smile. "We'd like you to be part of the Student Welfare Council. Help us create a safe environment for everyone." Asa agreed, but with one condition. "Only if I can speak freely. No sugarcoating. No politics." The principal agreed. And with that, Asa stepped into a new role, not just as a student, but as a representative for every unheard voice on campus. But with every rise, there's resistance. Hadiya, Seher, and Iman were no longer laughing. They had tried to ignore her at first, but the shift in power was undeniable. Suddenly, the girl they used to mock was sitting in meetings with the faculty, organizing mental health sessions, and initiating policy change. And worst of all, people were actually listening to her. The girls who once ruled the popularity game were now sidelined, and their egos couldn't handle it. "She thinks she's better than us just because she gave one emotional speech." Iman scoffed. "We need to put her back in her place." So they did what they knew best, they plotted. Rumors began floating around. "She's doing all this for attention. She's manipulating people with sob stories. She made everything up for sympathy." Some even said she forged her speech, that it was copied. The whispers became louder. Screenshots were faked. A manipulated video was leaked online, making it seem like Asa had lied about parts of her life. The tide turned quickly. Comments online grew hateful. Even teachers, who once praised her, began to doubt. That's how the world works. One truth spoken in pain can be crushed under the weight of 10 lies spoken in confidence. Asa felt the shift. The very walls that once applauded her now echoed with suspicion. Her mental health took a hit. She stopped attending council meetings. Her mother noticed the change. "Don't let them take your voice again," she said, gently placing a hand on Asa's shoulder. But Asa remained silent. Not because she was scared, but because she didn't want to fight another dirty battle. Until a miracle happened. One afternoon, she received a call from a woman named Anila Malik, a renowned journalist and social activist. "Asa," she said, "I saw your original speech. I know the truth. And I want to interview you live, on national television. But only if you're ready." Asa hesitated. She had never even imagined something like that. The internet had already chewed her up once. But then she looked in the mirror again. That same mirror where she had once questioned her strength. This time, she didn't see weakness. She saw fire. "I'll do it," she said. The interview aired live on a Friday evening. Millions watched. Anila asked her everything, from her upbringing, the bullying, the rise, the backlash. And Asa answered each question with calm dignity. "Yes, they tried to break me. And yes, there were moments I wanted to disappear. But I didn't lie. I didn't need to. My life was painful enough to be a story on its own. I spoke not because I wanted attention, I spoke because someone had to say it." And then came the final question. "What would you say to those who tried to silence you again?" Asa smiled. "I'd thank them. Because if they hadn't tried to break me again, I would have never realized how unbreakable I've become." The studio was silent. Viewers were silent. But their hearts roared. That night, the internet flipped. Her full speech was reshared. Activists, teachers, and even celebrities tweeted their support. Students across the country began tagging their schools and colleges, demanding mental health reforms, anti-bullying measures, and student-led councils. Asa had accidentally started a movement. Back on campus, things had changed, again. This time, no one dared mock her. Even Hadia and her group backed off. Not because they felt guilty, but because now, they were irrelevant. The truth had won. And Asa was not alone anymore. She began conducting workshops for younger students, especially for girls who had lost their confidence, their voice, their light. She would tell them, don't confuse silence with weakness. Don't confuse politeness with submission. Speak. When the time comes, speak. Not to hurt, not to win, but to heal. Years later, Asa graduated with honors. She didn't just leave college with a degree, she left behind a legacy. Her name was written in the college's annual journal under the section, Voices That Changed Us. But even then, she didn't celebrate. She quietly walked home, opened her worn-out diary, and scribbled a single line.